With the advent of the PS2, Jak and Daxter was one of those launch titles that brought 3D platformers to the next level. With a seamless open world and day-to-night transitions, it truly was a gem to behold. Even Jason Rubin says they might have overachieved. But along came Jak II in 2003, which brought about an edgier atmosphere with the addition of gunplay and a story about challenging the establishment. In response to the grand success of GTA 3, Naughty Dog felt like they had to adapt to the changing demographic and release something that would appeal to an older audience. I mean, deep and involving story? Jack's mad as hell and out for revenge? Yeah, they were clearly not going for the same tone as the original. And personally, I don't think change is a bad thing, especially for a sequel. Better to have a sequel that innovates over the original, rather than have it stay the same. But do these innovations incorporate well from the 3D platformer roots that the original started out with? Initially didn't have too much of a positive outlook towards Jak II, but who knows? Maybe this next playthrough will change my thoughts. Man, I'm really going to regret this. Yeah, I will admit that I didn't quite like this game when I initially played it. However, I thought maybe this next playthrough would potentially change my opinion of it. I was wrong. As I played more and more of Jak II, it just soured in my mouth. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's start at the very beginning of Jak II. So the game picks up where the first game left off, and Jak, Daxter, Kira, and Samos are testing out the rift portal that they found from the ending of the first game. Wait a minute. So, what they found from the first game in the bright flash of light turned out to be a rift portal? So, like, where exactly did they get this? Well, anyway, as soon as they activate it, a giant monster appears and Jak charges the speeder into the portal where they are transported to Haven City. As soon as they arrive, Jak is taken into custody while Daxter promises to save him in the nick of time.
Don't worry, Jak! I'll save you before you know it!
However, it takes him a good 2 years for him to finally save him. By that time, Baron Praxis had already tortured Jak, and filled with dark eco and rage, Jak and Daxter start on a brand new quest. So, my issues with Jak II's opening sequence basically begins with the portal. Like, I know Naughty Dog was trying to go for something that was darker and edgier, and they wanted to sort of make something that was appealing to the mainstream audience. However, I do feel like they should have done it within the confines of the original game. I know maybe that kind of stymies creativity. However, the fact that they used a portal to basically create a brand new setting with brand new characters, it almost feels as if Jak II is kind of like a brand new game, completely unrelated to the precursor legacy. It's almost as if the writers were basically like,
oh no, we're well past the deadline and we still haven't come up with a story.
If they really wanted to make a game with a different kind of tone from the initial game, then they could have still made it take place in Sandover Village. They could have maybe brought back Gol and Maya, but instead they almost seemingly scrapped everything from the first game and kind of started over.
Yes, Gol and Maya. The dark eco probably destroyed them. Probably.
It's like you were building up to something that never really fully paid off. If you want to make something with a more serious tone, have it work within the framework of the Precursor legacy instead of trying something completely out the wazoo. But hey, what can you do? So upon escaping to Haven Prison, Jak and Daxter encounter an old man named Kor and a young boy known only as the Kid. After a rather rude introduction, Crimson Guards attack, and Jak taps into his new Dark Eco powers.
That was cool. Do it again.
Something's happening to me. Something he did. I can't control it.
So I could go into how underutilized Dark Jak is, but since we run into new characters, I think it's time for the Haven City Gang character tropes. First, we have Torn, the hard-as-nails serious dude who has a past he would rather not share. Torn, what have you to say for yourself?
Get your squirrely ass out of here.
Very nice. Next, we have Tess, the woman Daxter simps for. Nothing else to say. Sig, the token black dude that is a brute on the outside but is mild-mannered on the inside.
Hello, cherries.
Crew, the fat slob who is greedy and pissed but can be a cutesy baby too. Errol, Jak's rival and a bit of a cunt. Ashlyn, the female character meant to appeal to the feminists because she is all about action and she takes things way too seriously without a smile. Onin, the mute fortune teller. Pecker, the monkey bird thing that is a pretentious prick. Vin, the nervous train wreck that spends too much time in the lab. Kor, the creepy old man who turns out to be a twist villain in the end even though you wouldn't think it. And that was it for the Haven City Gang character tropes. Yeah, they're all one-note stereotypes with little to no development. They barely move the story, some of them just tell you to do this or that. Torn, you ass. Or are just there. Like Tess. There are certain points in the story where the character inclusion felt awkwardly placed. For instance, towards the ending of Jak II, Sig supposedly gets eaten by a metalhead worm. However, in the actual ending scene, he comes back unscathed. Like, what? Why show him dying in the first place if you weren't going to kill him off at all? And then there are guys like Vin, who just sort of perished off screen. Seriously, I laughed at this line.
Must not forget Vin and all the others who sacrificed their lives to...
Like, the guy literally just dies off screen towards the ending of the game. Oh well. I guess he really was expendable after all.
They think I'm worth.
The only character who I felt like actually has different dimensions is Baron Praxis. I guess initially he doesn't feel very interested in the city and only wants to use the war as a means to keep himself on the throne so the true heir never returns. However, towards the ending, he seems to show a more sympathetic side as he declares to Jak this city is worth fighting for. But the change feels so sudden and lacks the gradual arc necessary for a character. And what about Jak, Samos, Daxter, and Kira? Well, for the most part, their respective personalities are all the same minus Jak, but we'll get to him. Daxter is still the loudmouth that basically cracks jokes all the time, while perched on Jak's shoulder. Kira is the mechanic girl, except this time she mostly just directs Jak with the races. I guess she also rebuilds the rift portal to get back to their home, so she's technically not useless, but she's been sidelined. And speaking of sidelined, Samos doesn't really appear too often in the game until the last quarter. Instead, his younger self steals the spotlight. Oh yeah, we meet the younger selves of Samos and Jak. It's some weird time travel shenanigans that I don't quite understand, but boy do I have a lot to say when we finally get there. For now, let's talk about the elephant in the room that is Dark Jak. He is never brought up that often and is instead only mentioned a couple of times.
Back for a few more Dark Eco treatments.
I feel like the writers could have used Dark Jak to show how Jak was trying to navigate change, how he needed to make peace with his Dark Eco half, but oh well. Instead, we get more fighting with Baron Praxis while working for the Underground. Speaking of characters and story, the tone of Jak II is also not very consistent most of the time. Often it felt like the game really wanted to go for something that was darker in the narrative, however it ended up being as if Jak and Daxter also has a lot of light-hearted scenes as well. It's almost as if they didn't want to completely alienate their audience, so they made a bunch of scenes where Daxter makes a funny joke, or there's a gag here and there. The result is a story that doesn't know how dark or light, no pun intended, it wants to be. And honestly, it takes away from the experience and makes it awkward sitting through some of these goofy scenes. So before you close the video complaining about how salty I am towards this game, which you probably already have, is there anything about the presentation that I liked? Well, the atmosphere of Jak II does successfully reflect a dark, gloomy, and post-apocalyptic setting. The dark city may not reflect the dense jungles of the original, but it does provide a city that is in the middle of decay. The people roaming around the streets look lifeless as barren praxis spouts as propaganda. The gray colors makes the city appear dismal and polluted, whereas the interior is a factory with gas coming from the ground and is serene and dark. Haven Forest is my particular favorite because it feels like it mixes together the dour attitude of Jak II with some of the greenery and charm of the first game. Jak and Daxter has always been an atmospheric 3D platformer, and Jak II continues that. And the gameplay also reinforces a lot of the dark themes the sequel was going for. Since the game takes a lot of inspiration from GTA, Jak II utilizes a sandbox open world where characters will assign you with several missions.
Each agent to a location they specify. Move all of them without any casualties. Don't screw this up, Jak.
Work for me and I'll throw some of the sweeter items your way.
Kill metalheads? Get toys? Sounds good to me.
Combat has also evolved in Jak II, as we now see Jak using guns to fight. These guns include the scattergun, which is a shotgun with good area effect, the blaster, which is a laser weapon that has decent range, the Vulcan Fury, the machine gun in the game, and the Peacemaker, which is like this game's Rhino that fires blasts of electricity, but you only get it at the end, so you barely use it. I'd recommend that the blaster is the most useful, since you can perform the Wastelander move to knock back several enemies at once, although the rapid fire of the Vulcan Fury is good too. I didn't feel they implemented the gunplay of Jak II very well. You don't have the ability to strafe, and the auto-aim feature is a hit or miss. In order to improve upon navigation from the first game, Jak II introduces hijacking vehicles and a hoverboard. However, this creates a whole new other problem. I know! It's like a total North Korea with how many Crimson Guards chase you. It's like the slightest touch, the slightest little tickle just fucking knocks them over and alerts the entire city. And when the Crimson Guards give chase, you'd better be prepared to run around the map. These fuckers really stick to your tail. It really doesn't make Haven City feel like it's a city that is worth exploring. Since it is so crowded with Crimson Guards surveilling the whole area, the city can feel like a linear maze instead of an open world. There's hardly really anything to really look for in Haven City other than a couple of optional side quests that Torn assigns you with, and most of these aren't very inspired, especially when compared to the main missions. These include trying to find where the precursor orb is hidden or flying through rings. You might as well not bother with these, considering they can be so tedious. Like, they really just feel like an afterthought. And then, of course, you knew this was coming. The damned difficulty. Yes, Jak II is a very difficult game. There is absolutely no contradiction against that whatsoever. And I already knew that from my first playthrough. But trying to go through this game again felt like grinding nails against a chalkboard. Seriously, I could not in the life of me bear to destroy the machine at the dig mission. There were too many Crimson Guards towning grenades in your direction, and the jetboard sometimes proved unwieldy with how bumping into walls would send Jak careening in the other direction. Seriously, fuck this mission. Or how about the one where you have to save the underground friends from the Baron's fortress? The Crimson Guards that meet you by the entrance kept shooting me off the platforms with the buttons. Not to mention, every time you died, you had to start at this exact point. Or how about throwing the bombs into the eco-wells? Okay, you've already seen tons of other reviewers complain about this too, and I'll stop. But if I could just point out, why does it indicate that you have 8 hit points when most enemies take off 2? There are only a couple of enemies that take off 1. Might as well make it 4 hit points. Bit of an oversight of the developers. Or maybe I'm just bad. I'm willing to acknowledge that, but all things considered, I pushed through, and it came to the end of Jak II, and I must say, the ending just kind of left me... Well, hear me out. It turns out that the kid that was the supposed heir to the throne of Haven was Jak's younger self. At least that's what Core stated, unless he was trying to pull Jak's leg. From there, the final boss ensues and you beat Core. Kira brings over the Rift Portal, and this is where things got kinda confusing. So Haven City is supposed to be some futuristic version of Sandover Village, and the gang decides to use the Rift Portal to take young Samos and Jak back to the past so that he could prepare to fight Core. Maybe I missed something, but what were young Samos and Jak doing in the future in the first place? If the Rift Portal sends them back, and young Jak finds the portal again, does this mean the Jak games go in a constant loop?
The more you think about it, the more it hurts the head.
Maybe there is a coherent explanation, but to me this is Jak II's precarious attempt at tying itself to Jak and Daxter, the precursor legacy. Make Haven City a futuristic version of the predecessor setting. There could have been better ways, but instead they kind of use a cop-out. It pretty much sums the underlying problem with Jak II. It differs way too much from the original. I know sequels are supposed to deviate from the first game, they're supposed to provide innovations. But Jak II takes it a step too far and changes everything. It doesn't improve upon the precursor legacy because there's nothing from the precursor legacy that was borrowed from this game, except for little small things. So how come I defend The Legend of Spyro and not this? It's because The Legend of Spyro is a reimagining and Jak II is a sequel. A sequel is supposed to innovate and improve, but Jak II only takes one of those aspects and runs with it, making it a sequel that was one step too much of an ambition. Thanks for watching my review. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.